many of you are aware, we have a new program here in our temple, which is known as the Bhakti Academy. And Vivekananda Prabhu is one of the main forces behind that. And this is a very special program. And if you'd like to hear more about it, I'm sure Prabhu will touch a bit today as well. But we do have some flyers at the front desk. And yeah, so we'll not take too much more time. I'll hand it over to Prabhu and we can get going with the program. Once again, once the lecture is over, we will be serving the feast. And it will be served at the back here. And you're welcome to eat here in the temple hall.
Krishna. How is everybody? That didn't seem very enthusiastic. You all, how are you? How are you? That's okay. One more time? How are you? That was still okay. We'll do a little chanting, maybe it'll be more enthusiastic. So we'll sing this Bhajan, or Jai Radha Madhava. If you know, you can sing along. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janamala Giri Varadari. thank you all for coming tonight. I see some new faces here, and that's very encouraging. This movement is for everybody. When our founder, Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, came to Toronto in 1975, perhaps it was 76, he was explaining that this is not a sectarian religion for any one group of people. This is actually a science. Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga is a science that if anybody applies in their life, it will transform their heart and they will develop pure love for God. So that is what we are trying to do here. And so it's encouraging to see that after a little bit of chanting, the science is working. You all did the experiment and the results are clear. The proof of the pudding is in the tasting. So you all are tasting it already. So we'll go into a little bit of the philosophy. If we get a little bit of background knowledge as to why we should do spiritual practices, it can help us to more wholeheartedly engage in them. And we get even better results when we do engage in spiritual practice. So we'll be reading from the Bhagavad Gita. This is the complete science of yoga. It was written down 5,000 years ago, but it's been passed down for much longer. And it's been studied by great souls for millennia. And it is ancient wisdom that is relevant always. So, there's good news and there's bad news. And I don't know about you all, but usually when my mom would propose this to me, she would tell my siblings and I've got good news and bad news for you. Which do you want first? So what would you pick? Bad, yeah, right. Why? You get it over with, right? Yeah, and then you get to look forward to the good news and it overcomes the bad news. So we got some bad news here, I'm sorry to say. And Krishna will be delivering that. So if you feel offended or if it's strong language about our situation in life, our existential position, then I'm not at fault, I'm simply repeating the words of Krishna. So we will be reading text 15 from chapter 8 of Bhagavad Gita. And this chapter, Krishna is describing that at the end of life, depending on the time that we leave, the season that we leave, the consciousness that we are in, this will influence what happens, our destination after leaving this world. And so he's giving us a clear picture of the state of this world, this material world in which we're living. This is an often quoted verse, so I thought it fitting to share. So the text goes, Mam petya punar janma dukhalayam ashashvatam nabdu vanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. Translation, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. You see in the verse, there's the good and the bad news mixed. There's, we'll read Srila Prabhupada's purport and then discuss. Purport, since this temporary world is full of the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death, naturally, he who achieves the highest perfection and attains the supreme planet, Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, does not wish to return. The supreme planet is described in Vedic literature as Avyakta and Akshara and Paramagati. In other words, that planet is beyond our material vision, and it is inexplicable. But it is the highest goal, the destination for the Mahatmas, great souls. The Mahatmas receive transcendental messages from the realized devotees and thus gradually develop devotional service and Krishna consciousness and become so absorbed in transcendental service that they no longer desire elevation to any of the material planets, nor do they even want to be transferred to any spiritual planet. They want only Krishna and Krishna's association and nothing else. That is the highest perfection of life. This verse specifically mentions the personalist devotees of the Supreme Lord Krishna. These devotees in Krishna consciousness achieve the highest perfection of life. In other words, they are the supreme souls. So before I begin, I'll offer respects to my spiritual masters and the previous teachers, because anything that I'm able to say is simply due to the wisdom that has been passed down. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshur Udvilitam Dina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. This means that I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. And I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto them. So we've got the good news and the bad news, and we'll start with the bad because you all wanted it. So the bad news is what is often quoted in this verse, Dukhalayam Ashashvatam, which means there's dukkha, which means misery, unhappiness. Sukha is happiness, dukkha is unhappiness. And also ashashvatam. This means temporary. So the qualities of this world that we're living in are dukhalayam and ashashvatam. So this world is a place where there is no happiness, ultimately. Why is there no happiness ultimately? Because ashashvatam. Because ultimately it's temporary. Krishna, earlier in the Gita, he's explaining to Arjuna, Yehi samsparti javoga dukkha yonaya evate adhyantavanta konteya nateshu brahmate bhuta. He says that the great souls who are intelligent, they see that anything that has a beginning and an end, adhyantavanta, is the birthplace of suffering, dukkha yonaya evate. So it's the birthplace of dukkha, or suffering. So we might find some pleasures in this world, but any pleasure we can look at that is obtained just through our senses is ultimately going to fade in time. So something that makes the tongue feel nice, some nice food, ultimately that taste sensation only lasts for so long. And not only is it temporary, but ultimately if we try to keep enjoying that same thing, then actually we might get some increased pleasure for some time, but then it goes down. Like on a hot day, then you might want some lemonade. And so the first glass of lemonade is really refreshing and nice. And then another one you can have, and that's maybe pleasurable, but then someone would probably have to force you beyond that. It wouldn't be pleasant anymore. So the things we enjoy with our senses, they're temporary, it's just a quick sensation. And then even if we try to keep enjoying it, we're not able to. And our material possessions are the same way. So we get happiness from certain material things. We enjoy certain clothing, we enjoy certain places, we enjoy certain people. Ultimately, all these things will fade in time. This is just the nature of this world. Trying to find something solid in this world is like trying to hold on to water. If you want to grab something and it's liquid, you can't. It will slip away from you. So, Dukalayam Shashvatam. And unfortunately, the world in which we're living, the culture, so-called culture, Gandhi was once asked, "What do you think of Western culture?" What did he say? Does anyone know? He said, that would be a good idea. So this so-called culture of Western civilization is promoting simply that your body is the source of all happiness. You are this thing, and making this body, this biological machine, making this thing feel good, that's the source of all happiness. And that's the purpose of life. And so in many shiny, glittering ways, this culture tries to just draw us into these things. So you walk down the street, and you see all these advertisements, and shops, and when you watch something online, there's all these advertisements trying to pull your senses to something. And there's celebrities who endorse things. They'll try to say, you'll be happy if you just get this thing. Right? If you just drink Coca-Cola. You know, if there's smiling people, beautiful people, and it plants this image in our mind that that's going to make me happy once I get that. Or you take a vacation to Hawaii, and that's going to fulfill you. But all these things they're temporary, they fade in time. So what we are seeking first things first is that according to Bhagavad Gita, the very first instruction Krishna gives in great detail to Arjuna is that who we are is not this body. This body is like a vehicle and we're like the driver. We are the soul sitting in the body, and the body is like a car. And by nature, this body has three qualities. It's asat, it's achit, and nirananda. So asat is like a shashvatam, same thing, it means temporary. Asat. Sat means true or something eternal. Asat means temporary or false. We can even see that our current body is much different than the one we were in 20 years ago. At a certain point, we were crawling on the ground. We had a body of an infant, and now it's an adult body. So it's a totally different body. So our body is asat, it's temporary. And it's achit, it's ignorant. It's full of ignorance, not full of knowledge. Chit is knowledge, consciousness, but it's achit, it's dead. It's simply dead matter. We move it with the spirit, with the soul. But the body itself is just dead matter, animated by the soul. And it's near Ananda. So Ananda is happiness, bliss. And the near Ananda means it's not a place of happiness. As we described, you try to enjoy the body. Yes, it gives you some temporary pleasure, but it will ultimately fade away. And if we try to keep enjoying the same pleasure, we will hit a threshold and we can't enjoy it any further. And sometimes it can even seem like the body is more designed for pain than it is for pleasure. Has anyone here gotten a really bad toothache before? Or have you gotten something stuck in your eye before? Or have you had a little tiny pebble in your shoe while you're walking around on a hike? The teeny little things, tiny little things. Or a microscopic little virus called COVID. Has anyone gotten that one? Don't raise your hand. So, our body seems to be more designed for pain than it is for pleasure, actually. Because that pain can endure for so long, right? If you have a toothache, it will just go on and on and on. Whereas the pleasures we get, they fade very quickly. Okay, so is that enough bad news? Have I fairly depressed you all? So, this is the bad news. This is our situation. We're in a world in which our body is not who we are, but we think we're it, and it is just bringing us mostly pain and only limited temporary pleasures. And ultimately, this whole world is a temporary place. So even this whole planet, which we're living on, eventually will fade in time. But there is a different world, which is the source of this world. Krishna describes in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that the real world, the spiritual world is like a banyan tree, and it's sitting on a pond. And there's a reflection of the banyan tree on that pond. And so this world is like a reflection. So it is real in one sense, that it's a reflection of the real world. But it's insubstantial, ultimately. So, and this world is of a different quality. So I was describing asat, achit, nirananda. So the quality of the spiritual world and the quality of the soul, our self, is sat, chit, ananda. So our real self is sat, is eternal. We don't want to die. We want eternity. Who wants to die? Who would choose to do so? Even if someone does, it's heartbreaking. It's a source of great pain for those who are near someone who chooses to end their life. Nobody wants to die. So the soul is naturally eternal. That's why we don't want to die. And that's why we also want pleasure that lasts forever. We don't just want, if you could have some pleasure that lasts for 5 minutes, or you can have one that lasts for 5 hours, which would you choose? And then if you can have one that lasts 5 days, 5 months, 5 years, then why not forever? So the spirit, our soul, the spiritual world, is of the quality of Sat Chit Ananda. And Chit means it's full of knowledge or conscious. So unlike this body, which is just matter, our self, our soul is spirit, and it is conscious, it's alive. And that is who we are. And it is described that it is like a sun. We, as the soul situated in the heart, the soul illuminates the whole body with consciousness. So can you all feel in the tips of your fingers, and the tips of your toes? Hopefully. So that's because consciousness is there. So from the soul, our self, in the heart, consciousness emanates throughout the body, and therefore we can move it. We animate the body. So one who's intelligent will see the temporary nature of this world and wonder, is there not something more? Is there something eternal? Is there pleasure that lasts forever? Is there a place free from death? Is there a place where I have full knowledge of who I am and what my purpose is? And so that world is described in Bhagavad Gita. And ultimately the highest planet is called Goloka Vrindavan, or Krishna Loka. And once we go to the spiritual world, we don't ever come back. We don't desire to come to this temporary world anymore. But from our current position, we might not believe that this exists, which that's all right. You might not even want to go there, because we have so many things we are attached to in this world. We have our family, we have our friends, we have our career, we have our desires, our hobbies. So, Srila Prabhupada, he didn't come to tell us just to give it all up. He didn't come and say to everyone, go to the forest and just meditate. That's what Arjuna wanted to do in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna said that it's foolish, that he is a warrior, he has a certain duty and a certain nature in this world. So the perfection of life is to use our current situation in the service of God. So, whatever we have in this world, we should recognize is something temporary, and ultimately this world is not a source of happiness. But we can use it in the service of God, and it will make us happy. There actually is a way to be happy in this world, and it's through developing the proper consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So we recognize that actually everything here is not mine. How can I own anything in this world? Someone can easily come, I say this watch is mine, but someone comes and steals it and then goes to another country. What ownership do I really have over this thing? So we ultimately don't own anything in this world. So we recognize that actually there is a supreme person who is the creator and owner of everything. And then we use it in the service of that creator. And in this way we come in touch with our soul and we feel the quality of Sept, Chit, Ananda. We start to recognize, wow, I'm actually not this body, I'm actually an eternal spiritual being. We start to develop higher consciousness and knowledge of what our purpose in life is and who we are, and we start to feel great happiness. So if we sing and dance in kirtan, do you feel that? We did the experiment at the beginning where I said, how are you doing before? And then I asked how you're doing after. It was much more loud, much more intense afterwards.
The soul leaves the body, you said it's going to be a dead matter, right? Once the soul leaves the body, we say that it is a dead body. How long does it actually take for this soul to go to hell, take the punishment, come back, if they deserve a human body or animal body or whatever body in the next one? What's the process? How long does it take?
Good question.
Well, it's definitely not eternal. So there's different worlds described that we heard in this purport. There's this is described as kind of the middle region of the universe according to the Vedic cosmology, and there's higher regions, there's lower planets which have different varieties of pain and pleasure. And so it's important to consider, even in this world, we can see that there are people who are living in hell, and there's people who are living in heaven. People, just down the street, we have very wealthy people who have wonderfully opulent conditions, and then there's people just down the road who are homeless, living on the street. So even in this world, we see that there's this distinction. But as far as how long you spend in either the upper or lower regions of the universe, it depends on the person. So it could be more or less time. But when you engage in chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, then it frees you from all of your karmic reactions. So if you had some bad deeds you had done in the past, simply chanting Hare Krishna frees you from everything. But there's a catch. Now that you know this, we can't claim ignorance. So we have to give up our bad habits and our activities that are harmful to ourselves and others, and we chant the Maha Mantra, and we will stay above any karmic bondage that keeps us in this world. And we'll be like a lotus leaf, which water can go onto a lotus leaf, but it will slide right off. So we can be in this world, but not of it. We can be unaffected by the material energy. I hope that helps. Thank you.
So why don't we turn the tables a bit, and I'm going to ask Prabhu to ask a few questions to see how well you all were paying attention to the lecture. We just got some offered guards.
Nirananda? Yes. Yeah, that's very close. Well done. Well done. What are the 3 easy ways to feel happiness in spiritual life that I mentioned at the end? 3 practical ways. Chanting Maha Mantra? Yes, spiritual food? And? You got a life line over there.
Association with devotees.
Very nice, yes, and books. So thank you all very much. Oh, we have one more.
A couple more.
A couple more. What is the highest planet in the spiritual world? Krishna Loka, Vrindavan, yes. Thank you. Very nice. Okay, this is a harder one for those of you who might know a little more. In the Pancha Tattva, this mantra we chant over here, which one of the members is an incarnation of Lord Shiva? This is a very specific one. You know? Advaita Acharya. Nice. Take a more advanced one. Okay, this is an easy one. Who's the first expansion of Krishna? Who's that? Balaram. Nice. Tiny ones.
So we have one special garland left. This was on Krishna's flute, and it's a very easy question. Where are all of you going to be next Sunday this time? Exactly. Okay, so now we can form